Nathan Cleverly versus Fonfara is a fight that I'm interested in. I know Lee Selby's fighting as well, but I find the Cleverly fight a more interesting matchup. I think it's very, very competitive, and I'm interested in this. Now, I touched on this fight in my extended live show the other day, where I was predominantly out to discuss Terry Flanagan versus Diego Magdaleno, as well as Liam Smith versus John Thompson. And I think my pick surprised a few people. Realistically, this fight is interesting, and it's a fight that I wanted to discuss in its own separate video and explore in a bit more detail for those who didn't fancy sitting through the 1 hour long live show. So let's get on to it. Funny, one of the comments that I received was that Nathan Cleverly was actually an overrated fighter, whereas Fonfara perhaps was more underrated. Let's examine that claim first and foremost, because I actually think very differently. I actually think that it's very much the case here of the other way around. Andrzej Fonfara is a good, solid fighter. He's extremely respectable. There's no one who can say that Andrzej Fonfara is a terrible fighter. There's no one who can say that he's easy to beat. He's a tough guy, he's a strong guy. But when I look at him, and when I look at what he does well, I don't see him as the most dynamic fighter. I don't see him as the most electric technician. I don't see him as the guy with the best speed. What's he actually done? I mean, this is a guy who's rose to prominence in the last year. And as I said in my live show, his two claims to fame: number one, that he knocked out Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. But I mean, how impressive is that, really? Chavez Jr. was fighting in a weight class above where he usually operates. He hadn't been training. He had terrible discipline outside of the ring. Realistically, wouldn't any top 10, top 15, top 20 light heavyweight have knocked out Chavez Jr. that night? I'm not trying to take anything away from Fonfara, but before we get too much on his bandwagon, let's examine how impressive is that form. I mean, wouldn't you have expected the likes of Callum Smith, Rocky Fielding, to have knocked out Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. that night? Chavez just wasn't there to win. He wasn't in the right condition to. The other thing that Fonfara has done, with credit, is he went the distance against Adonis Stevenson. And he rallied late on in that fight to have some success. And fair, he's got credit for that. Stevenson's looked very good. Stevenson's a pretty big puncher. Stevenson's the lineal champ in that division. And he performed with credit against Stevenson. But let's be honest, that fight was pretty one-sided. Whilst Fonfara did rally well, whilst he performed with credit, that was definitely a victory for Stevenson. Nobody was screaming robbery at the end of that fight. We're talking about a similar performance Bryant Jennings put up against Vladimir Klitschko. Jennings performed with credit. Nobody can really say he won the fight. The only thing is that Klitschko is more established and is, in my opinion, a far stronger champion than Adonis Stevenson. So when you look at Andrzej Fonfara, for me, I see a guy who's slightly one-paced, slightly lacking in dimension. I see a tough guy, a really gritty guy, a hard guy, a guy who can fight for 12 rounds, a guy who's super fit and super strong. But I don't see anything overly exceptional there. I don't see anything unbeatable. I really don't. The Chavez form, for me, very hard to value that form highly. The Adonis Stevenson form, it's respectable, but it was definitely a losing effort. Now, when you look at Nathan Cleverly, I view him as the other end of the spectrum. I view him as the forgotten fighter of the division. Nathan Cleverly was talked about very, very highly a couple of years ago. I remember there were talks about Nathan Cleverly versus Carl Froch. I remember there were talks about Nathan Cleverly, Bernard Hopkins. I remember when Cleverly was being talked about as the next Joe Calzaghe. Cleverly was thought of very, very highly. If you look back at the rankings, if you look at the Ring, or Boxing Monthly, or BoxRec, however you want to do it, you will notice that before that Sergei Kovalev fight, Nathan Cleverly was WBO World Champion with several defences and would have been commonly regarded as a top 5 light heavyweight. Commonly regarded as a top 5 light heavyweight. It would have been possible to make an argument he was stronger than that, because this was before Adonis Stevenson. This was before Sergei Kovalev being champions in that division. You know, Nathan Cleverly was at the top of the pile. He really was. Now, granted, he didn't face the strongest of opposition on the way up, but to my eye, he looked very, very good doing what he was doing. As I say in my live show, I was at his Krasnicki fight and I sat ringside. And if the same Nathan Cleverly turns up against Andrzej Fonfara, who turned up against Krasnicki that night, then Cleverly is also a guy who can fight for 12 rounds. He's also super fit. He's also strong at the weight. He's also tough and got a good chin. You know. But what I would say is that Cleverly, in my opinion, is a faster and more athletic fighter than Fonfara. Whereas Fonfara, on occasion, to my eye, appears a slightly laboured, one-paced fighter, Nathan Cleverly has blistering hand speed. He throws punches in bunches. His combinations are extremely eye-catching due to how fast they are. You know, Cleverly has certain attributes to him that are very, very likeable and Calzaghe-esque in that sense. Cleverly has also got a very good chin. He went 12 rounds with Tony Bellew at cruiserweight when, you know, he had very little left in the last few rounds but managed to get through it. And apart from the Sergei Kovalev fight, he's shown a good chin on multiple occasions. I've heard that he's sparred with Derek Chisora. Apparently he's held his own. You know, Cleverly's got a good chin. The move back down to £175, having been as high as £199 for cruiserweight, is a slight concern. You know, fighters moving up and down in weight class is never ideal. But what I would say is, for me, Cleverly, in hindsight, was never a cruiserweight. You know, he'd looked like he'd made some size gains to cruiserweight, but for me, this is a guy who is a light heavyweight. This is a guy who simply followed the money for a big money rematch with Tony Bellew. A fight that he definitely could have won in hindsight, you know. So, for me, whilst the move down to 175 is a concern, I know he hasn't made that weight for a long time, it's not a critical concern. It doesn't put me off him. And Andrzej Fonfara, whilst he can hit a bit, you know, I think the fact that he dropped Adonis Stevenson and knocked out Chavez is deceptive. If you look at this guy's career KO percentage, it's hardly Deontay Wilder level. You know, he's not a brutal one-punch knockout artist. I think he's flattered by his recent performances, Fonfara. And Cleverly, I see as very big at the weight. I see as generally strong chin. And I don't see Fonfara stopping Cleverly here. I see it going 12 rounds. Now with that, I think Cleverly's speed and eye-catching combination punches are a very, very relevant factor. Because I do believe that whilst Fonfara comes for a scrap, whilst Fonfara can put it on an opponent, if Cleverly stays smart and boxes, he can definitely outpoint Fonfara. And that's my prediction for this fight. Cleverly's not a power puncher. Fonfara is a very durable guy. I don't see a Cleverly knockout here, but I see Cleverly winning on points. I really do. Cleverly's got a habit of getting stuck into brawls at times. That famous Sergei Kovalev fight where he was knocked out, he stood in front of Kovalev, he planted roots, he forgot his movement, he forgot his game plan, and he just stood there. You don't want to do that with Fonfara. Fonfara's relatively adept on the inside, he's very, very capable in a brawl, he's the kind of guy who could beat you up in a phone booth. You know, Nathan Cleverly, for my eyes, is going to be better here if he sticks to his athleticism, if he sticks to his boxing, and if he throws the long 1-2 from range. You know, you look at Amir Khan, and sometimes when he throws punches from range, the hand speed and the way he can change levels is so eye-catching, it's enough to win him rounds. I think if Nathan Cleverly boxes to a game plan here, he can get the win. The momentum's with Fonfara, the home advantage is with Fonfara, the weight is with Fonfara, the fact that Cleverly still hasn't taken on a world-class trainer is with Fonfara. But in my eyes, Nathan Cleverley's the one who's underrated here. People are forgetting that he's a former champion with multiple defences and has only lost to a pound-for-pound level fighter in Kovalev and a fighter out of his weight class in Tony Bellew. Andrzej Fonfara is beatable. He's a good fighter, he's likeable, he's solid. But I just think Cleverley can outpoint him here. I think it goes the distance. And I think Cleverley's the more dynamic, agile and eye-catching fighter. I'm going Cleverley on points. It's a really good fight, genuinely of interest. I'm looking forward to this one. In terms of the gambling perspective, I've seen that Andrzej Fonfara is 1-2, Nathan Cleverley is 13-8. I'm not suggesting lumping on Cleverley if you get 6-4, 13-8. He's no sure thing. I think he's a little bit overpriced. I see him more as a... Well, I think he's going to win the fight, but I can understand why he's that price. I don't think it's like a must bet at that price. Cleverley does come with health risks, the weight, the lack of a trainer, the fact that sometimes he plants his feet and gets into a brawl. From a betting perspective, it's probably one I'd stay clear of. Andrzej Fonfara at 1-2, certainly wouldn't want to be backing that though. He's no sure thing and he can be beaten here. Let me know your thoughts on this video. Let me know your thoughts on the fight. How do you see it going? I'm going Cleverley points. Please leave your prediction in the comments section. If you've enjoyed this, appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, everyone.